those governmental powers that are maybe behind this kind of false ecumenical spirit going around with the globalist one world order church is a chastening for the real church to step up and say, let's do it the right way. Let's not run away from unity. Let's do it towards Christ. Let's pursue Christ's holiness and unify the church in this beautiful faith that we have, that God gives us, this faithfulness towards him. And let's work towards unity because Jesus said so. And that's Daddy. So I don't care what my local schismatic buddy over here is telling me. I want to do what Daddy says. He says, when the world sees that they're one, the world will know that you sent me. I want the world to know. I want the whole world to know. And so I want to follow what Daddy says there. You know what I mean? It's not, and I'll take a leap of faith. You can call me ecumenical. No, the ecumenical spirit is the worldly governments chastening. You know, they're not doing it they're doing it for their own intentions, but God uses it to chasten. You get what I'm saying? They mean one thing. They mean to pervert the church, but God will use that as a way of chasing the church and say, do it the right way.
Welcome, David, to Greenwood. Today I thought we'd have a conversation, a dialogue, because I found our work is very similar and very interesting. Getting to the essence of things really is chiefly what we need to be concerned with, because the spirit of the times, I find, is really pasting itself over in terms of the interpretation of the happenings in the news, Trump, all these things that assault us. But there's really like governing forces beneath that actually control what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Rudolf Steiner talked about this. Rene Girard, as you often quote, talked about this. But yeah, I just maybe the first discussion item could be this idea of no matter what's happening on the surface of things, there is a guiding principle leading history towards Christ, which you've talked about before, and maybe we could expand on that.
Yeah, well, you know, Christianity is what created the future. So the idea of a future comes from Christianity. And we were just talking about some of the trad movements online. Unfortunately, they're so excited about the past, they forgot that our way is the way of the future, really. It's, behold, I make all things new. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that you go off and run off into progressivism. But, of course, everything that reactionaries fear are really just cheap imitations of the real thing. So insofar as progressivism is a problem, it's a mutated form of what Christianity should be doing. You know what I mean? So that's the problem with the reactionary form of religion that people are clinging to online, especially. And it makes sense that they would cling to it online in particular, because the online world is the world of disembodied thought, a disembodied kind of a challenge to the incarnational reality that we were meant to live in. And so it's no wonder that the kind of dualistic, or dare I say Gnostic, approaches to religion are going to fester and be very productive in their promulgation of their, hate or whatever their issues are online. But that's my whole message, is incarnational theology. Currently working on a book on Trinitarian philosophy of science, which I think will be something the church should have done a long time ago. And I know others have done great work with it, but we cannot put up with the mess that we have in atoms today. You know, we have atoms, we have matter that doesn't really matter. And so that's the question that I have for the church today, and for those who are interested in Jesus, is if we don't even know what matter is, if we don't even know that matter matters, then how are we going to talk about incarnational Christianity? How are we going to live it? You know, if matter, according to our physics, is just an illusion, it's just a point, it's just a mathematical abstraction, then we're back to, where are we back? We're back to dualism. We're back to some type of, and all these different things are gradations to me. I just see them as kind of one little continuum of mistakes. Which is, I think, therefore I am, right? You know, Descartes, I know Descartes comes down later in history, but Descartes, to me, sums up the problem with dualism in its earlier forms. And this idea that I think blank, therefore I am a Christian. I think this is the right church jurisdiction, therefore I am a Christian. I think this is the right way of doing baptism. Therefore, I am a Christian. I think
Mm.
I think this is the way the Trinity should be articulated. Therefore, I'm a Christian. And yet Jesus says, look at the little children. They're the way to the kingdom of heaven. And most
Mm.
little children would flunk all of the I think SAT questions of deep theology that seems to be very animating for the reactionary folks online. So, I hope that we can continue to have a renaissance of exploring the riches of the traditions of the church, but at the same time understand that we're not a museum, we're not a mausoleum, we are the story of the future, and we are watching the inauguration of what I call the New World Order of Jesus Christ. And this is again offensive to folks who are in reactionary when you hear these words, New World Order, that's what the bad guys do. No, that's what Jesus did.
Mm.
The old world order is what the bad guys do. The old world order is based on human sacrifice. The old world order is based on mediating hierarchy with violence and coercion as the means to glue people together. That's falling apart. Insofar that we have what we call a new world order of globalists, it's just an attempt to rip off the aesthetic of Christianity and patch it on to the old world order and keep it humming along, but it's falling apart. And so the quicker we can understand this, the better we can start to get back to what we were supposed to be doing all along, which is to incarnate the love of Christ in our relationships so that everything is under his dominion. Everything.
Mm. Mm. I yeah, in so many ways, I agree with what you're
You
saying.
you asked a good
Uh,
question. I went on a little trail there.
and I incredibly, I'm laughing because it's just it's so good. So, but it makes me think of remembrance and providence. Honor the father and the mother. The mother being, when you think about Mary Sophia, being the tradition. Remembrance is a true living memory of Christ, which is when you're like reactionaries, you're going towards the remembrance. That's good, but you can't forget providence. We can't forget that providence is honoring the father. This is the mystic understanding of what honor and father and mother mean. The spirit of the essence of things, right? Because say when we think about our memory, we think about our goals, right? Our goals. We in liberal modernity, which is the imitation version of this, right? The imitation version, like you were mentioning, progressive liberal modernity. We create these goals for ourselves. In this, it's kind of like a Heraclitean logos I've heard you talk about before, right? It's based on grasping, taking, provoking, what we've been provoked by Satan and all of modernity to desire. And so that is our, from the surface, the everydayness that we are, that surface goal is our Father, and the our regular mortal memory, or even just a bit lower in the unconscious, is our mother. But it's about getting to this, but not forgetting, like you said, providence. And this is, you mentioned Christ. So whilst we go to the remembrance, Byzantine, all this stuff, incredible, incredible things, the Philokalia, the church fathers, the Mount Athos, the incredible, we must, but what they are doing on Athos with Hesychism is allowing for the invasion of Christ into them, right? In a sense, right? It's for the true unfolding and flowering of that remembrance, uh, for a progression towards a cosmos of love out of a cosmos of war, which is what Heraclitus says, right? A war is the father of all. And so, unfortunately, you have this antichrist. I'm just riffing on what you're saying. Unfortunately, you have this antichrist progressivism, which mimics this true invasion, which comes from hesychism, which comes from abandoning the goals we arbitrarily assign to ourselves, which is our fake future, our fake father, and the golden calf of, I would say, of sort of English, comes from English. Well, you may not agree with this, but I do think liberalism and progressivism are kind of tied together, and they created a kind of fake tradition in a way. So, but I'm 100% with you on uh, on all those points, really. But that's what we need is the only way to get to this though is not to do it ourselves. Even as Christians, I think we substitute our own will for divine will, and we call it Christ. Our Christ is guiding here and there, but it's actually very hard to dissolve the spirit of the times that we are through depth prayer, concentration, and contemplation and hesychism, to be able to discern divine will. Because that, not us though, your will, Lord, not my will, Lord. And it just seems like that is so much missing from the whole conversation, the whole effort of the reactionary right. Is it's all about, I'll solve this. I've got this. I'm going to save the West. You know, it's Willzermacht, will to power, resentment, and wanting to grasp and steal. It's just a renewal of the Heraclitean logos. It's a take, grasp, and take from you.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys that call themselves Orthodox or Catholic or whatever, traditional Christians, they every day they talk about how much they hate Indian people, you know, every day. You know, I know they have a disagreement with Vivek about politics. That's fine, you know, I understand, but they are so emotional. It's like you know, they're always trying to act like they're masculine, but it's very emotional, like a woman. You know what I mean? They're very emotional. They're very worried about their jobs, and so much so that they have to hate on a whole continent or a whole population of 1 billion people or so, a whole nation. And you know, I've sat some of these guys down and I said, you know, you think there's going to be segregation in heaven or something? I mean, you think there's going to be? He's stupid. I mean, how stupid is this? That this is the kind of Christianity that we have. You know, but you know, it's the same old. We've had these struggles all throughout the history of this message spreading, and it's not really that new in some ways. But you know, there's this, you know, this shock at the thought that you know, there are people, you know, they use Christianity as a talisman to help their whiteness. Okay, well, that you got it backwards. You've got your race as your primary religion, your civilization, and the aesthetics that you saw on a vaporwave 30-second Instagram video, and that's what you want to fight for behind your computer screen clicking buttons. Meanwhile, you know you've conceived that Christianity is this magic talisman that helps you fight for your white culture. It's pretty stupid. And you pine for the days of having another crusade. And you know, this is all not Christian. This has nothing to do with Christianity. This is just, like we talked about, microwaved slop paganism, you know, and it's trying to act cool, it's trying to act tough, and you're punching down at a nation that, you know, they have not had Christianity haunting and affecting the bones and the structures of their sense making as long as the West has. So you're punching down at people who have not had the infection of the yeast of you know, Christianity infecting the materiality of their culture as long as the West has, and you're just punching down at them. You know, you're saying, oh, look, they have these rituals where they look at the dung and all this, but you forget there's millions of Christians in there on the front lines of a pagan culture, spreading light, spreading nonviolence, spreading love and beauty, and to just denigrate an entire people, you know, just because you find some stuff online that's wacky or weird, and, you know, pagan rituals and things like that you can laugh at. People will find their, you know, so you can always tell the tell of whether someone is following Christ or following the aesthetic of Christ for their own points, or let's say the metaphysical or whatever it is that they're trying to assert that makes them Christian. You can always tell, because what lights them up the most and what unifies them the most is who they commonly hate. You know, when you find the spirit of Christ in a church, it's not what you typically would experience. I mean, for example, you know, if you are, let's say you're Orthodox and you go into a church, the conversation should not be, isn't it so great that we all found the truth? That's great. The conversation when someone comes into that church and they're a Nazarene or a Baptist or something is to say, what can I learn about Christ from you that I haven't learned yet? That's the atmosphere of saintliness. Okay, that's what saints look like. Okay, they don't have an attitude of, we are the real place. Thank God you got to the real place. But then they cover for it by this false humility, which is really just arrogance and pride of, oh, we're all just worms, though, of course. No, we're just worms. Just worms. That's called CYA. You're covering your tail so that you can continue on with this kind of worship of your own ideas, your own mental assent, which again, I have an issue with the idea of, putting the mental assent in and of itself isolated away from the practice and the action. That's not Christianity. Christianity believes when the resurrection happens, what do we say? Jesus is eating fish. Okay? He's eating fish. That tastes delicious, apparently. That's why he wanted it. He's having a campfire. He's got scars, which means the relationships that you have now will be with you in the new resurrection. The scars of the pains and the problems, the loss of a child, the tragedies, the traumas, whatever, come with you in scarred form, but healed, right? So that means that matter matters. Really, very much so, uniquely so in the Christian story. We are not pantheists, but we're not dualists. And we're not these, these monists, you get these monistic kind of philosophies where, it's all, the mind is an illusion. It's all material. That's kind of the old fading dominant institutional power structure of England and everything kind of waning. But then you have this other one that's more in vogue today, which is, no, everything is the mind. That's where you get quantum and all these other things. It's all the mind. And Christians just take this slop and they pick, these options or they take like a classical theism or deistic dualism, right? Where it's like, again, you got the material, you got the mind over here, and you got the matter over here. And again, matter is always in that position because they all assume Big Bang cosmology. Matter is a secondary kind of it's a little bit profane, a little bit less than the spirit. That's not what the story we believe. We believe that Jesus is incarnate. He's enfleshed, eternally so in the resurrection, eternally, never ending. And that if you're a part of that project, it's not just the flesh part of matter, the flesh being renewed that Christ has when he's eating fish is the crown jewel of all matter being redeemed so that God is all in all, right? God is all in all in the full consummation of this marriage between God and his creation. And of course, the body and the human body that Jesus represents is the crown jewel of that. But all of it matters. The grapes matter, the fish matter, the hot dogs matter, the things that we build with matters, the homes, the castles, the clocks, all of this matters. It all has a purpose. The Bible begins in a garden and ends in a city. There's clocks in a city. These things matter. All this stuff is brought into such rich focus only in the Christian story. We're the only story that truly elevates physical and bodily concerns as just as important as the spirit. It's not a downstream. It's not separate, interpenetrating. Just like the Trinity, interpenetrating, all in all, the Holy Spirit, the Father, the Son, all mutually indwelling, mutually self-emptying, mutually yielding, mutually interpenetrating one another with divine love, and yet distinct, but yet also fully entwined. This mystery that we see, the three persons in one. And we don't have a physics, by the way, that is that has any reflection of that. We have, look at our standard model. How many different particles do we have? How many different fields and forces? We have dark matter. We have dark energy. We have antimatter. We have black holes, wormholes, all these bizarre, ugly, grotesque things just glued together. There's no divine simplicity in the physics that we've allowed to persist so long. No wonder we have no wealth. No wonder we have no future belief, right? Because we have been running on the fumes of stupid, dumb ideas that are not Christian for a long time, that are a denial and assault on incarnation and an assault on the Trinity. Creation should be divinely simple, just like God is divinely simple. It shouldn't be ad hoc particles and leptons and quarks and all this infinite little spray of chaos and violence. What does the Big Bang? The Big Bang is another violent, again, attack on the body. It's an assault on the body. You have nothing, and then the spirit makes everything from explosions. So therefore, the spirit makes material out of nothing. So it's somehow material is again a downgrade to what the matter of the spirit is all about. So in other words, when you look at stories like what's happening in Gaza, where the kids and West Bank, all these folks are having their houses taken, they're having their olive trees stolen, they're being beaten. That is a product of the Big Bang cosmology in action. That the world of the spirit is superior to the world of of matter and body. But Christ on the cross, and Christ dead and buried and resurrected, and Christ ascended, disproves that, right? That's our cosmological reality, is that you don't get to say, well, the little kid gets to be killed because I have a theological thing that allows me to do that. There's spiritual matters that proceed over that child's life. Once we make that step, everything that we have in the world today is what we see. Oh, we can drop a bomb on Nagasaki, killing all the Christians in Japan, in the most concentrated area of Christians. Why? Because the mind is more important than the body. Our mind, our disembodied view of nation or greatness or Western supremacy and these abstract ideas, the world of the spirit, so to speak, is somehow superior to the world of the body, so that bodies are expendable for the matters of ideology. This is wrong. This is evil. And so far as Christian traditionalists, so-called Christian traditionalists, continue to operate in that manner. Oh, I could beat down the Indian, or I could attack this person, because their bodies don't matter as much as my ideology, my Christian nationalism, or my Christian imperialism, or my picture of church, of what the church body is, allows me to violently impose its will onto others and exclude others. We're not doing Christianity when we're doing that. And so I'm just kind of laying out the framework of the problem of our world. Like, everybody's so worried about AI. The AI and the problems that it may cause are only a downstream from having a disembodied approach to Christianity for a long time coming. I know this is controversial, but I'll say it too. I believe in the Nicene Creed, but the way in which we fought for these things for hundreds of years with Constantinianism, before Constantine, after Constantine, during Constantine, I have some issues with that, because Jesus does not allow for Christians to engage in violence. That is one of the biggest points of the cross, is the beautiful nonviolence and self-emptying of Christ. That story, you cannot push that story violently without doing violence against the purpose of the story. You have to incarnate it in everything you do. And that means fighting for the truth of the things included in the Nicene Creed without using violence, like stealing your opponent's property. Okay? Everybody likes to pick on John Calvin, by the way, but there's been a lot of violence, burning Michael at this, burning Michael Severinus alive, right? But it's been happening a long time before him. And when you destroy someone's body to proclaim the truth of Christ, that's a performative contradiction. It's performative, it's bearing false witness against Christ. Christ did not tear somebody's body to prove his divinity. If you tear somebody's body apart to prove their divinity, to make the point of Christ's divinity, you are performing a lie against Christ. You're bearing false witness against Christ. And you're using Christ's name in vain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that there are so many issues there. Where to begin with it? Yeah, look, I think that it's like I was talking about with the goal. It's an idol's put in the way of, and you mentioned AI, people worried about AI. It already existed civilizationally. The Heraclitan logos is an AI in the collective sense. right?
Yeah.
And that logos being grounded in fallen spirituality, any idea that Plato had that can be aligned with something close to the Joannean logos or Christ is only the memory. It's not the living memory. Because what they did have at a deeper level before Christ incarnated was a memory of things, right? That's why their patterns align somewhat with the truth. That the good, true, and beautiful are abstractions of the way, truth, and life, which is a being, and embodied being, right? Someone who's both spirit and embodied. And so that I think what that makes us, and it makes most of us, is pagans. It's actually a pagan. What modernity is, Nietzsche, when he talked about it, talked about the will to act, the will to power, the conversion or the transvaluation of all value into this value of will to power had already occurred. Like often, Steiner said this about philosophers, that they will simply articulate what already is. And so I find that people tend to place their own, what suits their own goals. I use Christianity or use Christ even to bring about my own goals. So this is like a symptom that happens with the people you're talking about, rather than what is most essential, which is to sacrifice your whole being to him. And so I think this is 99% of Christians, honestly. It's unfortunate, but they're struggling, and it's very difficult because the devil puts many things in the way. Like you mentioned, monism, the different monisms, dualism, these fundamental ideas, idols, or demons. You can even just call them demons, right? You end up worshipping them by accident, and they rewrite your impulsions without you realizing when you place them and are corrupted by them. And so who is willing to even bow the most their ideas of Christ and Christianity? Who's even willing to do that if it's uncomfortable, if you have to go through this existential dread? And you have to do this. We have to go through, and I've been through this, to actually have this properly happen and find Christ in the essence of things and actually experience him as a fact of experience. You have to go through what Valentin Tomberg called this, but an existential dread of surrendering your goals and all your ideas and bowing the intellect to be informed by what some have called intuition, but it's really, like you've talked about, we don't give room for Christ because he is at the essence of things. You mentioned expel him. That's the word. We expel him. And that's what the intellect does. It grasps.
And you expel him in the name of Christ. Yeah.
Yes, you expel him in the name of, in vain, in the name of Christ.
When you feel that good feeling, when you sit around and you talk about, aren't we so glad we're not the Catholics? Aren't we so glad we're not the Orthodox? Aren't we so glad we're not the Presbyterians? Aren't we so glad we're not the Muslims? That little good feeling you feel is the same feeling that Herod and Pilate had when they colluded in killing Christ, according to Luke. Yeah. You're feeling that feeling of bonding over the exclusion of a common, sucker, so to speak, right? And so that's how you know you're not following Christ in the right way. You've got to find the peace comes through self-giving, through self-emptying. And, René Girard has a quote that I got to find. I always it slips out of my hands, but, it's actually kind of controversial for those kind of folks. But it basically says that, Jesus, in some sense, God was apologizing to humanity when he died on the cross. And you say, oh my goodness, how dare you? Now, we're supposed to ask forgiveness to God. Why is he apologizing to us? But think about how a man is supposed to lead his family. If you have a problem with your wife, right? Man leads the family by showing, by modeling mimetically what he wants her to do, which is to yield to Christ. So he has to yield to Christ first and show her this is the way of repentance and confession, right? Confession does not just mean I did wrong to you yesterday about that. Confession is about the whole truth about who you are and your life story and the mistakes you have, the fears you have, just being honest with yourself. Most people don't even confess the truth to themselves, much less somebody else. And so, confession is this way of being set free by the truth. And that allows you to then be able to look rightly and look properly at your neighbor and lead them in the right direction. And they typically, if it's earnest and they are seeking Christ, then you're earnest in the way you model your confession and transformation of your mind, they too will imitate that. So if God wanted us to say, hey, I want them to confess their sins, I want them to ask for forgiveness to me, I will start the initiation process first, mimetically on the cross by saying, here I am on the cross. Here I am letting you know that I am sorry of your sufferings. I'm sorry, Jeffrey Epstein victim, the girl, being assaulted repeatedly, and Jeffrey Epstein laughing with his buddies that Donald Trump wants to protect and say, oh, next time, she said she felt the presence of Jesus. Next time you should dress up as Jesus. We could go to, did you see this email? This exchange? Did you see that?
Oh no, no. I
Yeah,
haven't.
there's an email where Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh well, yeah, I saw a bit of it actually. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And you think Jesus is saying, I'm sorry to all the existential suffering that people have gone through, including those people. That's current events. I'm just bringing that into light. But, I'm sorry you went through, the Thailand villages that were flooded and people's children ripped away from them by the currents. Beautiful little children just utterly taken away. Or in Puerto Rico, a story of a boy helping his little family member stay on the raft, and then waves came and sharks came, and the boy was taken. I remember that when that flooding happened in Puerto Rico. All these horrible stories, God, in some sense, on the cross is saying, I'm sorry. I'm in solidarity with you. I'm sorry for your suffering you've been through. And then we respond because of that beautiful compassion. And we say, God, I'm sorry for not following you as your bride, right? So the man takes the lead and shows the bride and shows the child how to follow. And that's the way we should be in the society today. If you believe Calvinists are in error and you are a Catholic, you should say, I'm sorry for the ways in which, and list them specifically, that we got it wrong, such that John Calvin had to create his movement as a reaction. He was wrong in what he did, but there were some things that we did wrong that led to that. And so let's redeem the good parts of some things he got right. And that's a masculine position. That's covering the person. That's covering the other person, which then allows that person to say, wow, you're not trying to destroy me. You're not trying to get me anymore. It's not fight or flight anymore. Wow. Well, I actually desire Christ and I have a right heart. So I'm sorry for doing what we've done to break up the church or maybe to go in different directions. Now you're beginning the process of peacemaking. Okay, this is peacemaking. That's why confession and peacemaking are all connected together. It's all relationship. That's why Rene Girard talks about every relationship. He doesn't say it in this language, but it's clear. Every relationship is reflective of the Trinity. You can have bad relationships or good relationships, but it's all Trinitarian. It's just inversions of the Trinity. If you do it bad, like you have the person who desires the object that the model has. That's a Trinitarian relationship. You have the person desiring the car. That's the other object. And then you have the person modeling that car who's got the Porsche, right? And you want the Porsche. And so you desire the Porsche, but you really don't desire the Porsche. You desire the ontological being, the perception of ontological fullness that person seems to have, because they themselves reflect a part of the image of God that you are different from. And so you crave the oneness with God. And so you worship the creation. Unfortunately, as Paul talks about in Rome, you trade the real union with God for worshiping and idolizing his creation by elevating the status of your neighbor in such a position that creates envy and covetousness in your heart. So it's not the object, the Porsche that you really want. It's the perception that Bob has a better life than you. Bob has
Yeah.
got it better than you. Bob didn't have to work as hard as you did to get to where he's got. Bob's got the car that you don't have, even though you feel like you've put in more labor and people don't realize you're the undiscovered genius the world is waiting to see one day. That's all part of that desire for the neighbor's being. That could become a conflict. But you see, the positive version of that is also Trinitarian, which is that, hey, Bob introduced me to you, and now I'm on your show. I'm just making up an abstract Bob. Bob told me all about you, and I can't wait to find out about you or whoever introduced you to me. Now that's a networking, right? So the person who introduces us is both a person and a relationship, just like the Holy Spirit is, right? And so relationality and personhood are entwined together. And all of our relationships are intertwined together. Like, when you hear people say, like a divorced person will say, I think my husband, my ex, was a wonderful father, but a terrible husband. And he's so good with the kids. No. That shows you your homework wasn't done, because you cannot love someone apart from loving the relationships that are formed within that community of the family. So you cannot love your child in isolation of the love that you show for his mother, or even if that's someone you've divorced. Your relationship to that mother is trinitarianly intertwined to the way in which you love your child, and vice versa. The way the child loves his father is connected to the way he loves his mother, the way he loves himself, the way he loves his siblings, and the way he loves his cousins, the way he loves his grandfather. All these Rene Girard, interdividuals, what he calls it. It's just a reflection of the Trinity. And so, once we understand this, you see, we're playing in the child's play when we accept the terms of the debate. When we say our world is theology and the world's world is everything else, that's ridiculous. That's so ridiculous and disrespectful to Jesus. No, Jesus is the king of all reality. So that means when you study anthropology like Rene Girard, you'll see, oh my goodness, the Bible is the key to all knowledge of anthropology and social science. Wow, oh my goodness, it's amazing. And then you just look at relationships. Oh, it's Trinitarian. Wow. And like I've just suggested earlier, when you dive deeper into physics, you'll discover it's reflective of the divine simplicity of the Trinity. Wow, what can we discover with this more accurate roadmap of God's creation to glorify God's creation? And the same thing goes for biology. The same thing goes for psychology. All of these things will be brought under his dominion. And so we should do this non-violently and joyfully, and stop hiding and acting like we're disembodied people only concerned with the spirit. That's not the Christian religion. That's something else. We've been practicing it too long.
No, I agree. But there is also, when you can make that sacrifice, when you can do what the hesychists do, when you are in regular communion through mystic prayer, and you can discern divine will, and this is a rarity, right? So this is in a sense, it shouldn't be the rarity, though. It shouldn't be. Then you can be in the state of Christ who lives and acts in me, as Paul was. But if you were, and then sanction can happen for certain things. But what that means is, say when he is a chastisement for someone in his community, you can't want that. You can't lust for that. It can't be a conflict between you and that person, like you were mentioning, right? But you may have to, but it should bring you to tears to have to do so. And who hell is actually really there?
Yeah.
Right? To be able to be justified for some, or sanctioned. For instance, there are some, say, an invasion from a pagan religion, like Crusades or whatnot. There could be sanction for a defense and to do things there because it is demonic, like demons are driving it, let's say, right? But again, it's something that, like, it's so difficult to get to the point where you're dispassionate, or to even know what divine will is and be able to discern it. The idea that any of these people we see are sanctioned to do what they're doing, other than perhaps asking a spiritual father, that's not enough. That's not enough. Like, you have to actually, because what I experience is being constantly torn away. And St. Gregory of Palamas speaks to this, is that the moment you even speak to someone is a dangerous moment.
Yeah.
The mimetic rivalry, like this thing, the devil, it's only Christ that protects us from this. And constantly calling on his name through the Jesus prayer,
Yeah.
but also through the endless remembrance of him that can protect us from it. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm just offering there is some cases
Yeah.
where a chastisement, but
I
you
mean, I think
you
there's
need
a
to not
place
be
for
wanting that.
I am
You
a
need to not be
total
wanting that.
believer in nonviolence.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know if that makes me a pacifist. People want to use that term. I don't really care. Um, I believe that's what Christ demonstrates over and over again. That is his way. I believe that nonviolence is not passivity, it's proactive. I believe that it is creative and that it actually does destroy evil because it did so on the cross.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
question is, we are always worried about what we're going to do wrong. But humanity did its worst on the cross when it killed God himself, or tried to kill
Mm,
Jesus,
mm,
right? So what do we have to lose? Why are we so afraid? Because that became our greatest triumph. Our worst mistake we ever made is our greatest triumph. It's why you and I are here right now talking about these things,
mm.
right? So I would never bet against nonviolence. Nonviolence is why you and I are civilized in some sense. We're able to not be savage, violent drones for some tribal, cultic, sacrificial, tribe. Nonviolence is what got you here. Nonviolence is what got you air conditioning. Nonviolence is what got you your suit. Nonviolence is what got you logic and reason and podcasting and microphones. Nonviolence of Christ is what infuses all of what we call civilization. Now, within that, does that mean that someone comes into your house to try to attack your family and you just sit there and do nothing? No, I don't believe so, right? I don't believe that's violence to restrain an attacker. I think that's force. So it's, these words are they fail to it truly capture the meaning and nuance here. I believe there's defensive force involved. And so, I believe that you should stop that, restrain those violent attacks. If you see an elderly lady being accosted by a gang, you don't say, "Oh, nonviolence, I will just walk on by." No, you try to stop it. And so, from those little examples, you could ascertain that we can have collective actions like laws and other collective actions where we protect the vulnerable from violence, like you said. But we have to be careful to go demon chasing. If we go demon chasing and we assume everything's a demon, then we're going to get into a lot of bad mistakes. If we think that, oh, help, priest, my wife's demon possessed. No, check your thyroid. Okay. Uh-oh. Sometimes it's actually your thyroid. Check your thyroid before you go off run around for a demon. That doesn't mean that demons don't exist. But to look for demons under every problem is not to think about the way God actually deals with people. Yes, you have demonic oppression, but just because somebody is bitter and depressed and having suicidal thoughts doesn't mean that it's a demon only. It could be demons are parasitically exploiting a condition that biologically can be improved. Why do we think that when we talk about biology, it's somehow a lesser place than when we talk about spiritual matter? You see, that's what I'm trying to get. I'm pushing people out of their comfort zone. When they talk about Christianity, we only must talk about it as spiritual matters. And then if I got to go talk about my thyroid, I go to a secular space, which is something created by Christians anyway, secular.
I appreciate that. I think that's
does that make sense?
No. I agree with. I think
again, it's a kind of dualism. Okay, I'm going to talk about my spiritual matters. There's demons over here, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to go check and do looks maxing and do mewing. Do mewing. You know how they do the mewing? Okay, that's my profane body stuff. That's my little profane. Yeah. And then I go back to my spirit stuff, and I talk about demons everywhere. Oh, I got to get that demons. And then I go back over here. Give me a break. It's all God's. God created us intentionally to be incarnational beings. He doesn't look at that like a defect. So when we talk about carbon dioxide retention in the tissue, it's not like we're talking about oogie boogie secular humanist stuff. That oogie boogie secular humanist stuff are just the people that did the job because Christians didn't do their job. They didn't talk about these things and bring it all
we need
under
to
Christ's
show how
dominion.
the Spirit influences those
Yeah.
things.
You'd have solved so many relationship problems if you just check your thyroid a little bit instead of always looking at a hobgoblin. The hobgoblins, I'm sure, exist. Just look at like, Hillary Clinton. What's that?
At the same time, like you said, it goes both ways. The issue is pulling apart. So the thyroid could be a demon. The thyroid problem could be caused by a demon at the same time, right?
Yeah, it could be a parasitical being.
Yeah. So it's like understanding that these things are both, like I consider it, I would say matter is enfolded spirit. It's just a deeper. Like if you look at subatomic particles, if you dig deeper beneath them, you find the will. You dig deeper through the will, you find spirit. It's just more enfolded. So of course he's a master of. It's a legitimate twofoldness.
Yeah.
It's legitimate and sanctified by Christ. So I'm with you on that. But we do both, don't we? We attribute too much to the material, and then when there is definitely a movement of people that probably over attribute, like you're saying. Like if we have a headache, if we're depressed, we'll say, "Oh, it's because I didn't sleep. I had too much caffeine. I did this." Usually, we attribute it to the material. I would say.
Yeah. But we're afraid. We feel like we're being less faithful to Christ if we say it was the caffeine and not a devil. You see what I'm trying to say?
You know what
I don't think God intended us to be like that. You know what I'm saying? You think God created Adam and Eve and said there's a hobgoblin under every pear in this garden, and if you eat too much of it, you get fat. It's a demon that got you. It's gluttony. No, it's like God created us to enjoy this creation. God did not create us with the intention of making us repent all the time. He did not create us and say, hey, you know what? My perfect will for you is that you just spend your entire life repenting that I created you or repenting that you're a bad person. That's not God's intention. God's intention was for us to be fruitful and multiply and to pursue dominion over the earth. When Jesus, the second Adam, restores that, it's even that much more doubling down on that. So I have a perfect respect. I don't say I'm perfect. I'm saying I perfectly respect, all due respect to the ascetic movement and all of that. But we were not created to be ascetic. We were created to be fruitful and multiply. That is the normative demand that God has put on his creation. If he wanted us to be ascetics, we wouldn't have existed. If Adam and Eve were intended to be monks and not procreate, then why did he create them in the first place to be fruitful and multiply and to exercise dominion over the earth? If he wanted us to be detached from the world, then why did he tell them to name every animal, including probably a relationship between the rivers and dirt, earth, magnesium? Why do we look at these things as if they're second grade or like second class concepts? No, that's the opposite. That's why the resurrection shows you that the point of God's creation is the material and the spiritual coming in together, entwined, like you said, together. Not that you have one pitted against the other. All of our problems are pitting one against the other. You're right. Typically, within the gods of our current dying empire, everything is assumed to be material. And then your spiritual life is kind of tucked away in this private prayer closet, right? Yes, that's part of the dualistic problem that I'm identifying. Yeah. I'm saying the way you fix it is that you've got to get Christ in. You have to see Christ as incarnationally controlling and loving and desiring all of it as a manifestation of his good creation, what he intended. Carbon dioxide is not a lesser thing. You know what I'm saying? God designed carbon dioxide to help our tissues flourish and be young and supple, our cells. And the same thing goes for magnesium. God does not hate magnesium because atheistic people tend to talk about it. We have become so brainwashed by this dualistic battle that here is the world of material, and it's mostly run by a bunch of secularists who think they're God. And then here's the world of the spirit, and this is where it's run by those who are interested in the things of the spirit. And they must fight a little bit. And every now and then you have to go to CVS or Walgreens to get your material stuff fixed, but it's just kind of a dirty little thing. That's Gnosticism.
The second part of this conversation is available for fellowship joiners. The links are in the replies. Join my website at scottmannion.com/fellowship or on substack.scottmannion.com.